housekeeping items. For those that have not had the pleasure of being in one of our fantastic meetings before, please silence your cell phones if you would. Also, the way it works here is after we do the roll call and approval of the minutes, the way things work is staff will present on an item, and then first it's open just to the commission for technical questions. Once we're done with those, we go back to the commission, and then we open it up for public commentary. If you have something to say, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address so we have it for the minutes. And then after public comment is done, we bring it back to the commission for discussion and a vote. With that, let us call the roll, Nina.
Kathleen Pratt.
Here.
Amadou Lavalley.
Here.
Lindsay Erickson.
Here.
Michael Ford.
Here.
John Hinn.
Present.
John Kiefer. Lori Palmieri.
Here.
Thomas Perry.
Here.
Justin Mitchell.
Here.
Derek Roth. Thomas Boytock.
Here. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from February 18th. Do we have any additions, corrections, deletions, et cetera for those minutes? Or do we have a motion?
I motion we approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion clearly passes. Moving on to item number 1 with one small correction. Extraterritorial 3-lot land division and certified survey map at 4701 County Highway S in the town of Oshkosh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologize for that little typo there.
Will survive.
This is a request for a 3-lot. Sorry, that's right.
Any site inspections? If you went to Town of Inland, you didn't find it. Okay, we accept the staff report as part of the record. On to you.
Thank you. This is a request for a 3-lot land division in the town of Oshkosh. The site is located on County Highway S, approximately a half-mile northwest of the Oshkosh city limits, and County Highway Y. Up on the screen is an aerial photo showing the subject site. It's one large parent parcel, about 32 acres in size. It's being split into 3. All 3 lots are approximately 10 acres in size. The existing zoning for the property is A2 General Farming District and is administered by the town of Oshkosh. And current use for the property is primarily agricultural, with a single-family farmstead here and several agricultural-related outbuildings. Surrounding area to the west, south, and east, and partially to the north is primarily used for agricultural purposes. And then over to the northeast, you have some personal storage, and then as you go to the north and the northwest, you have some low-density single-family residential. This request is also dedicating right-of-way along County Highway S on the south side, the southern 33 feet along the entire stretch of the parent parcel. With the current zoning is A2, the existing use is permitted by right. The A2 district does also permit limited low-density residential uses. Proposed Lot 1 contains most of the agricultural buildings as well as the farmstead. Lot 2 does take in a little shed over here, about a 200 square foot shed, and then Lot 3 is completely vacant. The applicant does not state in the application the purpose of the land division. However, it's assumed it will be used for development of single-family houses on lots 2 and 3. Access to the site currently is through a driveway serving the farmstead. The CSM does show the driveway to be relocated to almost the shared lot line between lots 1 and 2. And then the map does show a cross-access easement going along the south side of County Trunk Highway S to provide road access to lots 2 and 3. It saves from additional curb openings onto the county highway. The city's comprehensive plan designates this area for conservation residential. Conservation residential are generally areas located in fairly close proximity to urbanized areas, like as the city of Oshkosh. And the areas are usually primarily used for low-density residential purposes. So staff is of the opinion that the proposed land division is consistent with the comp plan's recommendation. We checked the Winnebago County's farmland preservation plan and identifies this area as an urbanizing district. Apologize for the quality, it's a little blurry, but the pink area are sections that are classified as urbanizing, and that means areas adjacent to urbanized areas that are shorter timing than later, ready for city-style development, considering its close proximity to road network and city facilities such as sanitary, sewer, and water. The Department of Public Works reviewed the proposed land division and only noted that, per the Wisconsin DNR surface water viewer, the website indicated that there may be some mapped wetlands on the site. This has been conveyed to the surveyor, and he's going to verify with the DNR if there are any mapped wetlands on the property, and if there are any, they'll need to be shown on the final CSM. With that, staff is recommending approval of the 3-lot land division in the town of Oshkosh with the one condition that if there are any delineated wetlands on the property, they must be shown on final certified map or certified survey map.
Thank you, Jeff. Technical questions?
Just related to that, Jeff, do we have a sense of where those wetlands might be roughly?
Yes, I checked it out myself. I didn't see the delineated mapped areas, but there are some indicator soils down here. You almost can tell it looks a little darker down here. So that's where I'm guessing that mapped area might be.
Okay, thank you.
What are the responsibilities of a landowner if there are wetlands?
But depending upon the, go ahead, Jeff.
Prior to any development, a delineation may be required, and that will dictate the extents of the wetland boundaries, and those wetland boundaries are more or less off limits to any type of excavation, development, that sort of thing.
Got it. The application again states that the proposed land use is not known, which I mentioned last time is pretty common, I guess, with these. Has there been any progress on including a question that's asks, is there any anticipated loss of farmland related to this zone change?
Yep, so we've been asking what their intended use are. We have not necessarily been receiving responses.
Has there been any progress on adding that specific question? We talked about that last time.
We're gonna get it added to the application form.
Yeah, we're currently revising
Beautiful.
the subdivision regs, and once that's finalized or concurrently, we're going to update our application, ask for more detailed information.
Awesome, thank you.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none. Anyone here from the public to speak in this segment today? That person's a ghost. All right, back to the commission.
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Second?
All right, discussion? Go ahead, Justin.
I just want to go over a couple things that I think are important to note on I guess the city language, city guidance, and I think they're in a difficult spot because, as Mark has said, there's not a lot that he feels the city can do, but that doesn't this isn't satisfying enough. I just wanted to read a couple things here. So, comprehensive plan, in some folks' eyes, is kind of the citizens' accountability and steering document for city planning activities. The comprehensive plan states that a community goal is the protection of economically productive farmlands and forests. The comprehensive plan also states that the protection of farmland is critical.
Can you reference where you're finding that in the comp plan? I just want to, because I'm looking at the goals.
Yeah, so
That's not a listed goal.
The easiest way to do it is if you go to the document and you click search and you put in farm. I did not put the specific page references on those two.
There are references in the appendix section.
Yeah, no, this is in the beginning. The state requires, as you know, the inclusion of farmland preservation language, and so where it talks about that, that's where in the beginning of the document where the language that it says a community goal is the protection of economically productive farmlands and forests. Probably in the agricultural natural resources section is where the specific quote, the protection of farmland is critical.
So
I can add those
that as a goal in the agricultural section. That's just where I'm trying to make sure I understand where, when you reference those sections.
Right. So I know the section that you're talking about because it does specifically talk about urban farming activities. And so I guess you could say that it's in one area and not the other. If you have a quote, the protection of farmland is critical, you could infer that there's some sort of value or meaning behind putting that specific statement in. But I did want to read something. So the city often partners, this is also in the comprehensive plan down in the bottom, D39. They partner with East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission and do a number of activities, regional planning sessions, goals, documents, and whatnot. And one of the visions for what the city would be is, I'm just going to read this here. In 2030, agriculture is an important feature of the economy and lifestyle of the region. Development pressures have been diverted away from prime farmland, and ample unfragmented agricultural districts exist. I'm going to just take a break here. And if you look at the map of where this particular section is, you can see that the whole thing is just a continuous farmland plot. And so this is what they're talking about when they say unfragmented farmland areas. It states that farming is practiced on the most productive soils. A variety of farm types and sizes are operating successfully. The region's farming community supplies both local and global markets. Citizens, local officials, and farmers are aware of and continuously address interrelated economic and land use issues. The viable and stable farm economy, in terms of farm income and prosperity, reflects concerted efforts by the private and public sectors to balance free market forces and governmental programs for land conservation. I say all that this is probably a great move, and this land is probably this farmer's retirement, right? So I understand every individual farmer's effort to at some point want to partition off their land and potentially sell it. What I think is not being done is, I think it's hard, but I don't know if the city is meeting their responsibilities and commitments as outlined in some of the guiding documents that provide a framework for which the department should be operating. I don't know what those are, but I guess we keep coming back to this, and it's like language says we should be doing something, and not much gets done. So thanks.
And if I could just follow up on that. So in the staff report, it indicates that this is not registered. The land is not enrolled in the Farmland Preservation Program through Winnebago County.
No.
Is that an optional thing that they can, or it's a voluntary? And then I guess, my follow-up question is, does the change of this land use to conservation residential,
So we're not changing land use.
zoning, sorry.
We're not changing zoning either. This is only a certified survey map.
But by dividing it into the 3 lots, is it kind of going away from what Justin is
So
talking
the
about?
current zoning district that it's in allows this ag split under the town.
If I could just answer, Jeff indicated when he was going over the city document that the application states that they do not know the purpose of the proposed land, but I think he said something to the degree of it's conceivable this would be for light residential development.
Yeah, I mean, it's conceivable to assume they'll try to put,
Yeah, based on
3 homes on it.
request of the cross-access easement in a single driveway, or relocation of the driveway.
and, to Justin's point, I understand the concern. I'm going to reiterate what we've said before. Our hands were tied by the state when some of the decisions that were made governing what we're allowed to do within our extraterritorial limits. One of those things that they limited the ability for us to do is to deny subdivisions. We look at the comprehensive plan, we look at the goals and objectives listed within it as a guidance of what we should be doing. There is no goal necessarily specific to farmland preservation. There is a goal about promoting urban agricultural programs and activities, but when they went through this planning document process, they did not determine that to be a specific goal. Now, I do understand they do reference farmland preservation in it a number of times, but it was not identified to be a goal. So when staff look at this, we have to look at, is it consistent with the zoning? Is it consistent with the goals of the agricultural section of our comp plan? We would say, yes, it is consistent with those items, and therefore we should recommend approval of it.
Other discussion, folks?
I guess,
Go ahead.
yeah, for Justin, I'm looking at the comp plan, and one of the things that the county looks at is this balancing of community benefit and landowner rights. And I'm just curious, do you feel that's not being done, trying to get down? Do you think that's out of balance? Do you think that this is inappropriate land use?
No, what I think is that the community came together and said farmland preservation is important. and added language into this comprehensive plan, which is really one of the, back when it was initially created, a great example of citizen participation. And it said that it's really important, and that the city will be doing, or taking efforts to, what's the word, the protection of economically productive farmlands and forests. And so it's not specific to this particular parcel, but it's the concept in general. This is something that is important, that should be worked towards, and continually nothing is done. And so I'm not suggesting that this particular lot isn't a good candidate. It's going to pass, I'm sure, and it probably should. But at the same time, there should probably be something in the background that's happening that works to implement some of these ideas of protecting and preserving our farmland resources.
Along the line, along those lines, as the city sort of projects growth, we've talked for years about mapping.
Yep.
Clearville Road and all, is there a mapping exercise that's going to be taking place in the near future that might sort of give us a sense of where it's appropriate for farmland to be likely, or?
I would say that was done as part of the comprehensive
Yeah.
plan when we went through the land use exercises of outlining the different land use districts and what is acceptable within them. Conservation residential was something that, talking through the towns and everything in the county, they felt was an appropriate land use of allowing, in essence, occasionally in certain areas, large lot residential development. They felt that was still an appropriate style development for that areas. And that's why I go back to the goals. There was a ton of public participation in this document, and from that document, goals were, produced. Farmland preservation is referenced in the document. It's important. I don't want to steer away from it. It's not.
Right.
But it was also, a decision was made that it wasn't put in as one of the primary goals of the document.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. Now we're just debating semantics. You're going down a specific list, and I understand. But something that maybe is important, maybe not. The quote is, the protection of farmland is critical. So to then suggest that there's no responsibility or action on that type of statement
No responsibility.
should potentially either that we should change that language to say that we do not believe that protection of farmland is critical, or if we're going to have that in there, maybe we should follow what that says. I just want to follow up as well. We're going to be voting or reviewing next a sustainability plan, which looks at decisions beyond today into the future of the city, and they've got a section on farmland preservation, support the preservation of agricultural lands in the city's extraterritorial growth area, from premature conversion of prime farmland to non-agricultural uses. And it just continues on. And again, we're going to keep putting these things in documents saying this is something that we think is important and that we want to work towards. And I understand that it's really difficult, but it doesn't sit well with me that nothing seems to be getting done at all.
Lori,
So do I understand then, what you're saying, Mark, is that because this is an ETZ, that we don't have that option? We're voting on it, but we don't have the option of denying
We can
it.
recommend an island, they will still approve it.
Okay.
We don't have the final say.
any other discussion?
Yes, just
Go ahead.
real quick, sorry. Thank you, Justin, for that. And I guess if I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this, if I understand this correctly, the state requires that we consider the protection of economically productive farmlands and forests when we develop our specific goals for our specific comp plan. So the city would have had to consider that, but chose not to include that, or within the process, we did not.
Correct.
Include that as an
That
explicit
front
goal.
section is what is required under state law to be contemplated when you do a comprehensive plan.
So we could theoretically revisit that when we update the comp plan.
Correct.
That would be the appropriate place
Most
to-
definitely we
to
could.
do that? Okay. Okay.
And as I understand it, that could even be brought back even sooner than the cycle,
Or you can revise a comp plan whenever you want.
right? Because we just
Yeah, like I
revised
said,
it, like,
the list of the 14 items are what the state law says must be considered when you do a comp plan. So like the section Justin was coding is one of the things out of the state statute. It's not necessarily one of the elements within the plan after that. It's what must be considered when the plan document is done. Then the goals are what the city, when they went through their process, chose to put it as goals.
Who would be the appropriate body if we were to revisit that and modify it?
This body,
would be-
This
right here.
Okay.
Yep.
So if Justin were to propose to you,
Yeah, if we
Modify
wanted
the
to
comp
take a
plan,
crack
we'd
at
bring it to
adding
this
or
body.
modifying some language, it would start here. I would say we should start with a workshop, go through, see what we want to reference, see what the implications are, what the legal ramifications are, and then move forward with it. Yeah, that's this body's.
Tom?
Thank you.
So every parcel of land out there as it stands right now, if somebody wanted to put a house right in the middle of that parcel and landscape it with rock, it still works, and we have nothing to say about it because it's designated that way by either the county or the township.
Correct. Any single parcel out there, even if it's agriculturally zoned, you could put a single-family home on.
Right in the middle of it,
Correct.
and there's nothing we can do about
No,
that.
we would not have that. That falls under
We wouldn't
property
even
owner
know about
rights.
it. We wouldn't
They would
even
just
know
pull a
about
building permit, and they'd be allowed to do so.
Their property.
So what happens if we don't approve the certified survey map?
Ultimately, it can go to the town. It still goes to the town for final approval.
All right. Anything else? Let's vote.
Crop,
Aye.
Kohlvali,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Vince,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Present.
Wojtak.
Aye.
Motion carried 801.
On to item number 2, which is approval of the updated sustainability plan. There's no site visit with this one. And we accept staff report as part of the record. On to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So item 2 is the sustainability plan update. This has been in progress for quite a while, actually. We'll get into it here. Just a screenshot here from the cover page of it. So this kind of goes back, in 2008, I think the Energy and Environmental Committee was formed. That later became the Sustainability Advisory Board. We have Margie here, our chair from the SAB. That board was tasked with advising the city manager and common council on issues in regards to sustainability and how sustainability can be incorporated into plans, into projects, processes, etc. So the board was in place for a while, had been working, making progress on various initiatives. And then I think not long after the founding of the board, they began, I believe it was a 3-year process to begin the creation of the original 2012 sustainability plan. That plan was approved 2012, and that had been guiding us for the past several years. In 2017, not long after I started with the city, the board decided that, they looked at the plan, the original plan, they realized that progress had been made on a number of initiatives in the community at large, by city staff and by the SAB, by other partner organizations. And so they decided to revisit the original plan to try to bring it in line with best practices, with progress that had been made in peer communities and in Oshkosh since 2012. So in 2017, we began a 1.5-year update process to go through the original plan and bring it up to date for the future. So 2019, we wrapped up the process, and now we're bringing it before Plan Commission for review. The plan format is pretty simple. We came up or maintained the original definition of sustainability from the 2012 plan. It's a pretty widespread definition, so you'll encounter it from a number of different sources. There's some context, some background in the initial part of the plan, and then we get into the main plan chapters. Those have been in effect since the original 2012 plan. They have not changed. The chapters have been revised, but the actual subject categories like atmosphere, economic development, etc., those remain as they were. So just giving you a sense of what those are, 10 major chapters of focus here. Part of our goal, not only to update the plan, but to enhance its appearance visually and to make it more accessible to the public, and to make it easier to access material and to see the breakdown of material. So the format. You'll see when you look at the plan, this is just the atmosphere, just an example of the atmosphere chapter here. We have an introduction with a number of images. Then what we do, we establish some context here and background for the chapter. Then we get into the objective, the goal, and then action items in a number of categories after that. So you can kind of see this is the typical layout you'll encounter. If you haven't read the plan or looked at it, I encourage you to do so, You may have questions that come up that we as staff can follow up on. You may have answers to questions that you would ask us. You may find them in the plan. So just a suggestion. But anyway, this is an example of typical layout here. Again, chapter format, introduction, the goal objective, and then action items for implementation. The comprehensive plan was a major document that we looked at, and this plan is consistent with the 2040 comprehensive plan. If you look at the comprehensive plan, if you look at like the agricultural, cultural, and natural resource chapter, for example, you'll find a lot of goals that the sustainability plan tries to take account of and to advance and is in line with, I would argue. So there are multiple goals. I tried to cite some of them in the staff report. I believe the last major paragraph before the recommendation, I did mention the consistency and some of the goals from the comprehensive plan. So again, getting into the update process, the original plan was approved in 2012. Update process started in 2017. Just to give you a sense of how things worked as far as public participation and SAB and staff involvement, the SAB members kind of got together. They assigned each member a chapter or two from the original 2012 plan. Then they, on their own time, revised the chapters. They did some research to make sure, see what we were doing, what had been something that had been accomplished, areas where we could potentially continue to enhance sustainability. They came back. We had workshops after each public SAB meeting, so members from the public could come, and these were noticed workshops, so, in accordance with state law and such. So members of the public were invited. We came together at the workshops, staff and the SAB, and we revised the chapters. I, as a staff person, then took the chapters afterwards and put them into the document. We came back together at one of the SAB meetings and went through the whole document and tweaked it after that. We're now at the Plan Commission step, and then Common Council approval would be next. So that's just to give you a sense of the update process and the fact that we did try to involve the public. We tried to make these workshops accessible to the public and had these things noticed. With that, we recommend that the Plan Commission approve the updated sustainability plan based on the finding that it is in harmony with the comprehensive plan.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Yep.
Technical questions. Laura?
So I see that our chair for sustainability is here, and I'm kind of curious about, in the government section, chapter 5, some of the recommendations in the plan, or one of the recommendations that relates to energy management under the government objective that we require energy modeling as part of architectural design in all new public building construction to help determine the greatest efficiencies for energy conservation. And I guess I just wanted some clarification if there, maybe I missed it elsewhere in the plan, if that would also relate in some of our facilities assessments. And I think, more recently we've had like the public safety, fire and police department and city hall facilities mentioned for either significant remodeling or new building. So I'm just trying to clarify whether or not the energy modeling piece of that would encompass being involved in some recommendations as it related to our city facilities.
Yeah, well, let's have, Margie's been vital in this, more than vital. What's a word that's more than vital? Margie?
Super vital.
Driving force and helping us and helping the city in general with sustainability. So she's probably the local expert on
Can you
this.
answer the question?
I don't know, Tom. I'll give it a try. As far as the government section of this, when the SAB looked at this, we thought the entire government section pertained to municipal buildings. We're not saying this reflects every business in town or every residence. So yes, this would definitely be part of anything that the city was doing. And once again, I may have said this before to several other boards and commissions through the years, but it would be really nice if everybody was aware of this plan, all the departments and all the boards, and if they actually would read it and take the part that pertains to them. So thank you, Lori. Yes, this should be something that is part of the municipal plan. Is that the question? Yes, Tom, I can answer that one.
Beautiful.
Margie, do you
Don't go
recall
far away.
when they did the Department of Public Works
Central
latest building?
garage,
Did
yeah.
that one come to sustainability?
That did. That was the only large project that we've really had the opportunity to weigh in on. And that did come to us in the planning process. We actually met with the architects ahead of time. During construction, we had an engineer at that time on the board that was kind of invaluable for thinking things through from the sustainability point of view, but he knew what could actually happen. And we, again, got the opportunity to weigh in on it at the end, where we did recommend that to the council at that time that it be LEED certified. The council chose not to LEED certify it because of the cost for the certification. What that means is that now we don't have any data for the next building that we do for the city, because we don't have those matrices that we would have, the information we would have gotten from that LEED certification. So my guess is that if the SEB were to weigh in on another building, we would continue to recommend LEED certification or something similar.
We have other technical, go ahead, Justin.
In your understanding or maybe hopes, if something like this is approved, how would you hope that the city uses it?
Well, in a perfect world, it would be the basis of actually forming a green team for the city. We did propose this to the council in a workshop, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. I know it was definitely under a different mayor and several council people were different at the time. But at that point, we are suggesting that a green team be formed by the city that would ultimately lead to a sustainability director being hired. But that's not the initial thing. It would be nice to have one person from each department in the city and each board, commission, or committee actually talk to each other, like even just once a year, and find out what everyone's doing, so that the sustainability board, which we put a lot of time into this, but basically we end up being nothing more than a little research group for somebody who decides they have a project they want to send to us. So we would really like to know about things that we could help with earlier in the process. Often when I find out about something, it was in the city manager's newsletter and it's just been completed or something like that. Try as we might, we haven't been able to figure out a way that our little 7-person board can find out what everybody in the city is doing. By city, I mean with capital C, all the departments, all the boards. And maybe you guys have some ideas on that. If you can figure out some language to put in here for that, that works for me. Just tell me what it is.
Mark, maybe a question for you. Do you feel that the planning department is kind of the overarching body of the sustainability committee, or who would you say is the staff department that is
The
related?
Sustainability Committee is staff liaison through the planning department. Ultimately, I really say the council is the overarching body that makes the decisions on a lot of the things that are in this plan, because most of the financial impacts of things in this plan ultimately are what the council has ultimately made the decision on. I do 100% agree with Margie from a city-wide perspective. We need to do a better job including them on at least projects that are going on so they have a chance to weigh in on them.
Sure. So this is another document that, well, I don't know, maybe I should wait for discussion before I...
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's get some technical questions then. Other technical questions? Don't go far.
I guess,
Go ahead.
is there any mechanism for tracking progress on this plan, either goals that we've accomplished through the city or other partners? Do we track that at all?
I think the closest thing right now, not directly aligned with the plan, but the closest thing is our Green Tier Legacy Community membership. That's through the Wisconsin DNR. And they have like a score sheet of sustainability initiatives. Some of those are included in here. There's a lot of overlap. What you do is you score yourself and you ascribe points to each category depending on your progress, and then you put goals for the next year. And so we have made progress, and we have to submit that every year to the state as part of the annual report requirements for the Green Tier program. So that's the closest thing we have to something like that.
I could respond to that a little bit too, Lindsay. We also do have our annual State of the City update that we've done many, many years, and that kind of helps us go back and look at our plan and say, oh, look, all this stuff got done. Awesome. Let's be sure and take credit for that, whether we did it or not, whatever. And then we also have our annual goals. And on the last page of this plan, you'll see the 2019 goals, because that's when when the Sustainability Board last saw this. We do have updated 2020 goals now that we'll be swapping out. And the plan was, because this is an electronic form now, it will just be switched out every year as we update that. But that we do track, and we track that pretty much on a monthly basis at our meetings to see where we're at.
Justin, do you have another technical question?
Yeah, so you have a section on economic development and another section on government, and I'm curious where you would see development projects in which the city provides financial support, say through a TIF or other economic incentive, where there's kind of that blur. Where would you? I guess I'm not seeing a specific section on that. So where are you seeing that falling?
I think it'd be either land use or economic development. We had some sections where there was some overlap, so we mentioned similar things sometimes twice. I think, Margie, right?
This is
That's
true.
a-
You may find the same thing in more than one section.
Yep.
And we thought we would err on putting it in two sections rather than missing it completely.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing it at all. So I wasn't sure exactly where you were seeing it fit. So.
We may
and
not have ever considered that one, Justin.
Mamadou, and then
Oh,
Mayor.
yeah. When I think sustainability, I think long run, and for the goal that are set, you said you try to see if progress are being made, but I was more concerned about the efficiency of the action, and with that assessment of those actions, are they doing what you expect to? Are there other things coming that you didn't expect? So is a plan for assessment and adapt to changes that needs to be made in order to adjust those goals along the way.
We have not put hard numbers on anything, and there is a reason for that. Initially, like back in 2008, 2009, we did start out with the ICLEI plan, it's an international group that basically assesses greenhouse gas emissions for places. And it had 4 goals, and we did complete the first goal, which was the greenhouse gas inventory for the city. The second goal was to have, help me out here, Stephen, which is second and which is third? One is to create an action plan, and one is to, milestone 1 was the inventory, milestone 2 was goal setting for the, which we did
Targets,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, the targets, so that we'd say in 2030 we'd be here, in 2050 we'd be here, which we worked with the East Central Regional Planning Commission on. They had a grant, they worked with us. The third milestone was to actually create the action plan on how to get to those milestones. Now keep in mind, this whole thing was just for greenhouse gas emissions, which is, only the main thing we need to take care of around the world. So, which is why there's an ICLEI, or whatever they're calling it now. At any rate, we took milestone 2 to the council, and this was, again, a different mayor, a different council. They chose not to pass milestone 2 until we had milestone 3 in place. And about the same time, the city also chose to not fund ICLEI anymore, which is a computer program that costs $1,000 a year or something. And we didn't have the staffing help or volunteers on our board who were capable of moving that forward. So the work that we had done on that, which some other people in this room were very, very helpful with too, very instrumental. I'm not the only person in this room who's ever served on the Sustainability Board, let's be clear. So all the work that had been done on that kind of was for naught. That's the only example I have where we've directly tried to track something with numbers. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Was that helpful at all?
Yeah, I was
You're
just
nodding,
thinking,
that's good.
Yeah, I was just thinking simply that, okay, in this case, in this particular example, I think you are getting information, getting data about the emissions. So that will but if you set an action plan to do something, that we should have an impact or should prevent something from happening. So after a while, do you have a plan to assess to see how that is going? And if
I think that'll be part of the green team, don't you?
All right.
Mayor?
So, just jumping over to the local food, section 7, there was a recommendation in here related to garden, exploring the use of acquired lands. The City of Oshkosh Redevelopment Authority is land banking for future redevelopment for interim neighborhood gardens. And I am curious because in recent months, a couple of neighborhood associations have inquired about the use of some of the land in the city for permanent gardens. And I was just curious as to whether or not there had been any, I guess, public participation by any of the neighborhood associations or the Healthy Neighborhood Association group to discuss that desire on their part to implement permanent as opposed to interim, because there have been several interim community gardens that have become quite successful within a few years, but then been cut short because of further development that came upon those parcels or were intended to be that never actually happened. But
The SAB has never been approached by any of the neighborhoods for any collaboration on anything like that. But we also have never approached the neighborhoods. And so I'm just making a note here that here's maybe something else we should put on our to-do list, which is,
so
Fair
was,
enough.
I guess the question is, was there any consideration then by the SAB before they made that recommendation for interim? Was there discussion about the merits or?
Can you tell me exactly where you're at, because I'm not finding it?
I'm in section 7 under promote local food production, sales and consumption. There's the section that Justin referred to about farmland preservation, and under number 5 in that section, although I'm not sure how that relates to farmland preservation, but in any event, tangential, was this number 5, exploring the use of acquired lands
Oh,
that
I
the
find
city
it.
RDA are land banking for future development for interim neighborhood gardens. So I don't know if you understand my question, or do I need to
You're wondering if
clarify
we
it?
had, when we wrote this, if we were only considering it for interim, or if we thought we should be recommending that some land be permanently made into gardens,
Yes.
correct? We had no discussion about taking any land permanently for that.
Okay.
What we were looking at the time was there were some lands available that were not being built on at the time that the city owned, and a couple of those did become neighborhood gardens or interim gardens for a while.
Okay.
And that's what brought this to our attention.
Okay. Thank you.
Other technical questions? All right, so,
I've
Go
got
ahead.
just one.
Yep.
So this document falls largely within planning then. What has to happen if we were to, say, request that language from this sustainability plan be included in city decision-making and staff reports when you present here? So, for example, let's say that we did the farmland discussion today, that there would be a section on, well, let's see what this plan has to say. We look at comprehensive plan, we look at that document. What does the sustainability plan have to say on that? And include that as part of our decision-making process and at least our public staff report.
You're asking if something could be put in the sustainability plan of what?
No, I'm asking so I asked Margie what would be a hope of the plan, and she basically said that it would be considered, and that when staff is doing their work, that this is something that's considered. I asked you if this body kind of falls within planning, and you kind of said yeah, and so it's kind of a planning related guide that talks about a lot of the same things that we talk about here. And I find it would be helpful if this language was also present when we're discussing different projects that the city is proposing, such as we're talking about a likely split with of a farmland lot with the likelihood that it's going to result in the loss of farmland preservation. Well, it'd be relevant, I think, to consider this guide or this document as well, and when we're looking at the picture of city guidance.
Okay.
Did I understand you say put that in the staff report, the language that refers to that item?
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
if that's
asking what
some-
would
if
have to
that's
happen.
something this board wanted, is for us to include a sustainability section within our staff reports, and the board wanted us to do that. I don't see why we couldn't.
If it's applicable. I mean, it may not always be applicable, but there's certain things in here. You know, when
I would
something,
want it one or the other.
you
From my
often-
staff perspective, I would either rather always look at it and say, staff reviewed the sustainability plan, does not appear to be applicable in this case. And from a consistency standpoint, as I direct staff to do it, if the board wants that, I would rather make sure we always do it. I don't want to get into a situation where staff interpreted we didn't feel was applicable, and then we come to this body and you did. I would rather have a clear-cut understanding of what you want, and if that's what this board wants, then we would always look into it.
okay.
Any other technical stuff? We can just skip ahead. Do you have other things you want to say? Because you're the public. So.
I am. I'm
But
the
if
only
you had-
public
if you
who
had a
cares
formal
about
presentation-
sustainability,
If
Tom.
you have a presentation, I want to give you the opportunity to share
Oh,
that with us.
thank you. Well, I did have 45 minutes planned, but I'm
Less-
going to.
less than 45 minutes.
I will curtail that, actually. I guess I would just ask that if any of you have not read this plan, that you do take a look at it. We worked really hard on it, and we'd like somebody to, read it. And I think that you may find semantics or something that you want to change in there, but it was the best that we could do at the time that we wrote this. Now, this has been in the process for several months now, and quite honestly, with sustainability, stuff changes so quickly that I'm sure if we were to reread this right now with a really fine-tooth comb, we would find a couple of more things that maybe in terms of alternative energy or something, there's always something that's changing. But what we tried to do was bring it as up to date as we can with the idea that it is a living document. And we hope that through our action plans that we publish at the end of it, that will continue to keep it up to date, I guess. I mean, for example, at our meeting last night, which we had even a smaller viewing public than you do.
Hey.
Well, I don't know about the viewing public, but I do know about
we get viewers.
the present public. We talked a lot about electric charging stations and infrastructure in the city and the need for that. And that, frankly, wasn't something that was even on our radar back in 2008. It just wasn't. And now it ought to be. So we are trying to keep it as up to date as possible, but we always appreciate input. Yes, Mark?
Something for this body to consider, and I'm really going to look at Brandon now. I think it may be beneficial, because as you talk about the action plan changing every year, is to maybe have a presentation. What time, you've been doing those in like January? What time do you normally do those?
We try to do those at our January meeting.
I think it would make sense for maybe late January, after that body has done that, is to have a yearly update at Plan Commission for what the action goals are for that year. Is that something this body maybe feels should be added kind of to our yearly calendars every January, February, something like that? We have sustainability board with staff and Margie, or I hope Margie's been around for a long time on this board, come and kind of present to you what their action plan, what kind of the latest thought is for the sustainability. It seems like a good idea. I
Yes.
kind of want to see what this body.
And then I also had a question regarding, somewhat related to that and what you were talking about earlier. Margie, do you know, is there anybody on the SAB who periodically, or twice a month at least, when city council agendas, or twice a month when plan commission meets, looks at the agendas that are published ahead of time to see if there might be an issue that SAB may want to weigh in on?
I know there are several people that do that intermittently. We do not have anyone assigned to do that on a regular basis.
Okay. So has it been operating, and I should know this, but I'm asking because
I actually rely on the mayor to let me know if there's something I should be aware of.
Me too.
Yeah.
along with 220 other people in the boards and commissions. Awesome. Yeah, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Got a question for you, if that's fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
The sustainability group has been pretty involved in waterfront programming, shoreline restoration, that sort of activity, and I see that that's an important section in your plan. The city is currently undertaking a pretty extensive planning process for quite a bit of waterfront activity in the Sawdust District. Do you know, has anybody approached you for feedback or guidance or involvement in the process? Is that something that's been presented or as an opportunity for the committee?
It has not been yet, and we have not yet inserted ourselves in that. We did make some recommendations for the Lakeshore Park, and they were not taken as extensively as we would have liked from our perspective, but it was progress. So it's all an education process. I mean, why is it important to plant deep-rooted plants? A lot of people don't get that, and they just want to put their turf grass right down to the water's edge, you know. So if we can continue to educate people on why it's important and what it does for our environment, we're hoping that it will just become more automatic through the years.
I know some of the planning documents, such as the impediments fair housing consolidated plan, talk about kind of racial discrimination in housing and whatnot. Is there any other sort of city document or committee or anything else that specifically addresses social and economic opportunities for minority populations?
Can you think of any, Mayor?
You don't have to have an answer right away. I mean, I think that
I mean, as you pointed out, the two biggest ones that I can think of relate to, you know, the impediments for housing and the CDBG action plan, or the
Those are
keeper in
probably the
that.
two primary documents.
Actually, the strategic plan also does reference that as well. And there are those half a dozen core elements in which that is described.
And being updated to include more.
Yes, we will be getting the updated version or draft for
Then-
council to pass soon.
Next week? Or is that?
Either next week or the following.
Yeah, in March here, an updated
Yes.
strategic plan for the city is going to council for approval. And I can say it does include additional elements for housing-related stuff.
Right, and it's more of the overarching, obviously, strategic level, but
right. Specifically, I guess the reason that this came up is community support on page 22 starts to talk about some of the things outside of what people often think of as sustainability, which is they think of the environment and nature sort of thing, but there's oftentimes these sorts of plans have some sort of social and economic section that tries to address a fair and equitable community for all different types of segments of population. Maybe that's not something that gets in this year, but I think that if there's not already a body or a document that's specific to that beyond housing, that maybe this is something not to throw more onto your shoulders, but there's more onto your shoulders is something to consider.
Actually, Justin, it's funny that you mentioned that, because while I was reading through this in preparation for coming today, I mean, I'm just recently becoming more aware of the diversity, equity, and inclusion component that should be involved in everything, and have some other documents that I'm working with that are being basically proofread for making sure they're okay for that. We did not put this through a DEI lens. When we did this, it wasn't front burner yet anywhere. And it occurred to me this morning that maybe this should go through that lens, just because there may be things that we do need to update in here. I would not hold it up for that, frankly, because this could take a little bit of time, because I would need lots of feedback from a lot of people. But I think that it would be a very good goal for us to have to go through this with the DEI lens and see how we can improve the document.
What, Mama, do I think, did you have?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was,
Sorry about that.
first I was thinking, you guys did a good job, and I'd like to congratulate you for that. And the document, the first iteration was done in 2012, you said, and then 5 years later, you started to amend it. And so I was thinking the document itself should sustain time. And I was wondering, do you plan to amend it as time goes, or would you set time frame within which you're going to revise
I'm
it?
only laughing because, yes, we had a 5-year planned update, which would be 2012 and then 2017. What we didn't realize was that an update was going to take us like
2
3
years.
years, yeah. So, yes, we do have it planned to update every 5 years, so we only have a couple of years left anyway.
All right.
Mayor?
So I think this kind of speaks to that on a larger macro lens, and in the economic development section, where on page 27 we're talking about the triple bottom line, the people, planet, and profit aspects. It says promote and educate institutions and businesses to measure their success not only by the financial profit but the environmental and social performance. So is it the thought that when you're saying, when the SAB puts that in as a recommendation for promoting and educating, who would be doing the promoting and educating in that situation?
Once again, Lori, I need you to,
Oh,
your
I'm
page
sorry.
numbers don't match with mine.
Page 21.
Page 21.
Triple bottom line is the header.
Okay, got it.
And it's
we're on
under
number,
section 2 in economic development. So it's triple bottom line number 1.
okay. When we-
Sorry, didn't mean to
Yeah.
confuse you.
We, when we wrote this, we were considering that this is something that the entire city would need to be doing. But when we say promote and educate, you're asking who's going to be doing the promotion and the education.
Who was SAB like thinking of
Right.
doing that?
We were suggesting that everyone do that. This is such an odd document because it's written by the SAB. We wrote it for the city of Oshkosh, as in the whole city. We try to hit all the things that municipalities should be doing, but we want it to include all the citizens of Oshkosh and beyond. So I do understand where sometimes it's a little hard. Basically, if there's anything in here that you're not sure if it applies to you, it does.
We're all responsible. You.
Other comments or thoughts? Go ahead, Kath.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to the SAP for your hard work and for this plan.
Thank you, Kathy.
It's very comprehensive and very readable. I'm sitting here paging through it. I'm gonna go home tonight and look at it more carefully again. But there's a lot in here that if somebody just reads it, if you can get people to read it, a light bulb will go on.
And that's why I
in
would
various
encourage.
ways for various people, and yeah, no, your group of 7 is no way going to be able to do this all yourself. But
Well, we had Stephen's help, and that's why this one looks so beautiful. It's even prettier than our last one that had all that wonderful information in it. And to thank you for that, Kathy. We do appreciate that. That's why I think a green team would be beneficial, but even if we don't get that far, if there's some way we can just send this to every department head and say, have you read the part of this, the chapter of this that pertains to you?
Or just send them the chapter. I'm serious.
I know.
Like you send me 6 pages that I.
Don't overwhelm me with the
Right,
whole
right.
document. Just send transportation to transportation.
right.
Which is one way I found out that,
With a cover sheet.
those departments weren't reading what we wrote. So thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? Oh, go ahead, Justin. And then,
Just a quick question.
Justin and Mike.
If there were proposed changes, is this an appropriate time or no? Because does that mess up everything that you guys?
I mean, it's a internal document for the city, so if we want to make changes, my recommendation would be send it back to advisory board. That's kind of their document.
Mm-hmm.
Let them evaluate changes as you would want, and then bring it back. It's not, it's a little different than some of the plan document stuff
Right.
we've done. But yeah, if there's changes you want, I would say if they're editorial and simple, we could probably do it here. If they are content driven, I
Right.
think the best would be to have the board that's kind of been in charge. And I know Margie really wants this thing approved and do it now, but
I was going to suggest you put a deadline on anything that was being sent back so that we meet on the first Monday of every month. So if you wanted to get it back to us by then, we could work on it in April, for example.
Yeah, and then bring it back in late April, you know, because I know we'd like to get this update approved. It's probably been too long since we've done it, and we want to get it done. So if we have things you want to address changing, do you have any issues if we collect those and send them back to you?
No, we'd appreciate it.
Michael and then Mamadou, right? Oh, Michael and then Kathy.
All right. So first off, I love the idea of working with the neighborhoods as an implementation arm. So I would like to invite you to Miller's Bay. Come talk to us we'd love to have you there.
Send me the info.
Yeah,
They're
we'll
18.
do. We'll do. Yes, and all of them, of course. Sorry, it's a different hat I wear. But I think the second point is a little broader, and it strikes me, this conversation about we have all these different plans, and there's always concern about consistency and awareness. We have concern about implementation and performance measures. I mean, I'm a broken record on this, but it just cries out for a centralized point where we have a performance dashboard that everybody has access to, everybody sees, and we can track progress, and everyone has the same information. I think that would go a long way toward getting everybody on the same page.
Maybe a green team.
So, Michael, are you referring to, because I believe they do an annual report, right? There's an
The SAB?
SAB annual report on the action plan, right?
Yes,
So are
we
you
do.
suggesting that would become the dashboard?
I'm taking that and all of the other plans and having them all in
Oh,
one
certainly.
spot. So it's easy, and
Are you talking about
Inclusive.
effective and efficient government?
I am. Come get your MPA if you want to
just-
learn more.
Oxymoron of the day.
Back to the question then, or the discussion about the green team. So just, I don't know if SAB has had any inquiries or not. I don't believe I've received any applications, but there are multiple openings for ex officio youth members as well. That could be a potential genesis of a green team, perhaps.
Kathy.
Thanks.
I just want to encourage us to pass this plan tonight. They don't need to have us micromanaging their plan. I sense that the SAB would like input, they'd appreciate input, because they've got good discussions started here. So if we have input, let's provide it, but let's just send the plan.
And to
through it.
Kathy's point, we have to look at also the lens that this body is reviewing this plan under,
Right.
and it's for consistency with the comp plan. That doesn't mean changes couldn't be made between now and when it goes to council. We're really looking at, is this consistent with our comprehensive plan? We can give input on what's in the document, but that's what this body's job is, to look at it in the terms of, is it consistent with the comp plan? Minor changes probably don't materially affect your opinion of if it's consistent with the comp plan or not. Maybe they do, I don't want to speak for the board members, but if you feel it's consistent and there are maybe edits, changes you would like, Sustainability Board could still make those before council approves the document.
Sure. If I'll let other people go, but later on I'll just one change that I was suggesting.
I was gonna say, just because we keep going a little bit around with this right here, we're also now planning on meeting with them in January or February of every year, so we would have an additional chance to create, input for you on that besides this right now and whatnot. So it's not like we're creating less opportunity already. We're already creating more opportunities.
Yeah. Actually, when I asked my question about the time frame, it was about the fact that a certain thing probably have to wait for the next iteration. So since 2017, we've been working on those changes. We need to wrap that up and then have people prepare to infuse more changes in the next 2022. Yeah.
Yep, 2 years.
It's just that everybody should be made aware of it, so that everything concur to that point, and then more changes are being made from different vantage point.
Mayor.
So then, if this body is going to approve it for consistency, there could potentially be some amendments made now. I mean, this is a pretty significant decision this body makes, and I would say all of the work that has gone into not just this iteration, but all of the sustainability planning over the years, it would seem that this would be our option to add or give that input rather than it getting to council and then council sending it back, because council's relying on this body
Council
for
would-
advice on the
council-
consistency.
On a consistency basis, correct.
Yes, and I believe there was one issue with consistency that was brought up earlier, so would it be appropriate for an amendment to the language be made at this meeting or after the fact?
Well, it looks to me like we're asked to see if it's, to find that it is not in conflict with the comprehensive plan.
If you believe it is, then you probably should recommend language and send it back to sustainability.
It seems like you could go either way. We could look at this as a recommendation from the sustainability. Maybe we need to look at the comprehensive plan and like I mentioned about farmland, Michael had said that we could look at that language. It's in here. It's maybe not to the degree that you think it's motivating for a city to do work on it. So it could go either way, right?
Well, kind of as the statute is laid out for this body's job is, if you do not believe this plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan, you should recommend denial of it.
Correct. That's the way I understand it.
Now, if we want to amend the comprehensive plan, that is a separate discussion to have and that we can do. But
Right.
as the statute lays out of duties of why this is coming to you presently, it is for that decision. Is it consistent or inconsistent?
Right, right. And we should not be micromanaging. We can't, right now, make amendments and vote. I don't think that's appropriate.
I mean, that's really up
We
to
should
this body
vote
if they believe it
yes
is
or no, that
appropriate
it's
to do
in
or
conflict.
not.
And I'm sorry, I want to vote yes, and I need to leave. I'm sorry, I didn't think it was going to be this long.
Other thoughts? Go ahead.
I guess, do we want to just go to discussion? We're still in public
Yeah,
comment.
but we have to make a motion to adopt the findings and recommendations first, so thank you, Marie, very much.
Make a motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Second.
Second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded, now we go.
Okay, the only thing that I was looking at was, we've talked a little bit about using a further guide to help us in at least collecting information and being more knowledgeable about the development projects that the city gets involved in, provides financial support, specifically related to the sustainable nature of their development project. So my thinking, or I think we had some conversation on it, was that there at some point it could be valuable for a checklist or some sort of evaluative tool, not to say yes or no, or to be used for denying or evaluating the credibility of a project, but for information purposes, collection of what are people doing right now, so that we could gather some sort of baseline on the projects that we're supporting. So one example in this, where they have buying local, it really talks about, I think, buying in Oshkosh, right? But if you look at the LEED standards, which is Leadership for Energy and Environmental Design, they talk about materials or products extracted, harvested, or recovered, as well as manufactured within 500 miles of project site, and that their recommendation would be about 10%. I think like that sort of tool, that sort of evaluative thing, is something that could be in one of their goals that we would find, or we could use as something that would be helpful in enabling us to do our job. It does talk about in the comprehensive plan, promoting, conservation of natural resources and whatnot. So that specific thing is one of the areas that I was looking at. That it'd be nice if that was something that, if they were interested or willing, that could be part of that.
Would you say it materially affects your opinion on that this is
I'm going to move
consistent?
forward. I didn't. That's why I asked what happens if we make recommendations. If it's going to slow the whole thing, we can pursue this, even if it's not in this plan.
Correct.
My guess is if we make recommendations at this point, Margie curses our name.
We always appreciate input.
Anything else? All right, let's call the roll there again.
All right, Coulibaly,
Yes.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Vince,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
Perry,
Hi.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Do we have anything else? Do you have anything to share with us?
I do not.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we're done.